Thanks for joining me in the sandbox. I'm April Dawn Patterson, and I invite you to play with me and my guest today, Peggy Foster Rush. Welcome, Peggy.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Well, in this first segment, we pop into a virtual coffee house before hitting the beach. And being the benevolent host that I am, your order's on me. So what order do you give the barista?
Well, if they have brewed flavored coffee like hazelnut or coconut, I would do that with cream. But if they didn't have brewed flavored coffee, I'd probably get a medium latte. And if they had a good banana bread, I would do that too.
Hmm. Well, now that you have your beverage, let's dive right in. The next segment is
Okay.
called I Think I Know You From Somewhere. So, in your spotlight moments, Peggy, have there been any claims to fame, times that our listeners may have seen you or your work?
Wow. Well, perhaps. So back in 1984, I was actually a television reporter in St. Cloud, Minnesota. And I did that as a television intern, graduating with my journalism degree. I left that and then went on to doing radio for about 2 years. And then I left that completely. But I have done some voiceovers here and there. If anybody worked at the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, I worked there for 21 years and probably knew 800 of the 1,000 people that work there by name. But most recently, in the last 5 years, it would be through Peggy Foster Astrology or through the College of St. Catherine in St. Paul, Minnesota. I teach at their spirituality center called Wisdom Ways. And somebody once said, you look like Angelina Jolie's mom. So there's that too. And I don't know what her mom looks like, but it's just like, okay. It happened at a bus stop one time. And I'm like, well, that's fascinating.
When I'm sharing this show, maybe that'll be an opportunity for me to do a social media post where I have you, and then inside next to you, we'll have a picture of her mother.
Well, I don't know if I look like her mother, but I think they thought that I could be like an older version
Ooh,
or like
I
that.
see.
So and
Oh,
I would take it. I would take that any day. Yeah.
oh. Well, now I'm curious what her mom looks like, though. Anyway.
I know. We better Google that. I don't even know who her mom is, but yeah.
Well, guests are asked to choose a word or phrase that they would like to hear used more often in everyday conversation, something that doesn't get enough play, enough airtime. And the prior guest chose for you the phrase divine feminine. So you are tasked to try to somehow, I don't know how, somehow fit that into our conversation today.
Okay, so
Now,
April, what if I told you all of these moons behind me are a representation of the divine feminine? And after spending much of my year in a patriarchal corporate America, 5 years ago, I left that to say that I, as a soul sovereign being, am here to support the divine feminine wherever I can. And that's why I run women's circles. And that's why my practice of astrology is 99% women. So weaving divine feminine in would not be a problem today at all.
and I'll let the listeners in on a little secret. I do not know much about Peggy at all. So they're learning about you as I learn about you. And I'll take this opportunity to tell them how we connected at all. I had been aware of Eugenia. Is that how you say her name?
Yep,
The
Eugenia.
host of Accessible Astrology.
Accessible. Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason why was drawn to her work is because so much of astrology I felt was explained, or I felt a lot more connected to it once I realized my rising sign. And she has a whole
Yeah.
rising sign method that she's trademarked. So I've just been kind of like on her free newsletter and so forth. And then this past week, she opened up the community part of it free to everyone. So I took that opportunity to jump on, and from
This is
there, you reached out to me. So how did you find me?
So this is what's so funny. Probably about a year and a half ago, I saw a podcast or a YouTube that included Eugenia, and I loved her whole sign approach as well as using rising sign. And I'm somebody who's always used rising sign because your rising sign is your soul's promise to the world. And when you do readings, the planets are showing up in the houses much more so than just in your sun sign. So this week, something came across my feed and her thing was free. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to go see because I think she's pretty cool. And then I saw yours and somehow I just thought, well, I'll just reach out to her. So here's the other thing. I have been working a lot in the areas of intuition and I call them nudges, but every once in a while I'll just get a nudge. And I saw you and I just got a nudge to reach out to just say, hey, you ever want to talk? Because I think you had also said that your teacher was in Minnesota. And then we found out that we had a similar astrology teacher, Adam Ellenboss, and I had gone through his program back in 2020. So I think that was kind of the connection, but it was, yeah, I just got a nudge to reach out to you. And then lo and behold, we have these other connections.
And I just saw
Yeah.
like your profile, your little bio, and that's all I knew before I invited you to come on to the podcast. I just saw that you did women's circles and talked about intuition. I'm like, this sounds really great. And then once you shared with me your birth data and I pulled up your chart right before we got on this call, speaking of rising sign with your Cancer rising, I don't know, I immediately felt safe and just very welcomed and cared for. It was really weird, but yeah.
Well, and you too are a Cancer sun because I pulled up your chart. And so your sun would be shining in my first house. So that's also one of those things that we would just have kind of a natural, hi, I see you. I see you back. And there's kind of that safety and security. You too, as a Cancer sun, you shine in nurturing and protecting and making people feel at home. And that's what my rising sign does too. So we share that in common.
So I loved that. And I wanted to bring you into conversation to talk about your women's circles, your retreats. And then I found out later that you do astrology. So find out like what your offerings are. But yeah, the divine feminine won't be hard for you to bring into the conversation at all.
I just had to laugh because I'm like, could you have picked a better word or could your previous person? But you know what? There are invisible helping hands that are holding us all with love every single day. And I think as these things unfold, it's perfect. The miracles are always there. You just have to open your eyes to see them.
So you also get to choose a word for the next guest to dance with. And it could be a peculiar word that you find funny or just something that's resonating with you in this moment. So what word are you laying down for the next guest to pick up?
All right. So the word I wrote down is groundedness. And I will tell you why. In my teaching of intuition and in my own being able to be intuitive, if I am not grounded and plugged into both the earth and the divine, it's real easy in these times to get off center and to be worrying about everything that is outside of ourselves. So I believe that we all need to take time to be in nature, to be quiet, to make quiet dates with yourself, meditate, do yoga, go for walks, stretch, whatever it is that brings you back to your heart and yourself as a soul sovereign being. And so the word I'm choosing is groundedness because I think it's hugely important. We're living in a very ungrounded time.
I love that because I've just kind of dabbled in numerology, and with your life path being a 31-4, that 4 is all about groundedness and creating that stability, and it's about creating structure and that groundedness. So I love that you mentioned that. That's really cool.
So it's interesting. I'm looking at the book right now that says You Were Born for This, which is Dan Millman. And that's where I learned about being a 31-4. So we also have numerology in common. Funny or not. And again, we didn't talk about this. We barely
did
talked.
not. I'm telling you, this is like our first time to like see each other. So yeah, I have it put to the 31-4 chapter in his book, and I highly recommend this to everyone just because what it had to say about my life path number was so spot on. I was thinking to myself, the author Dan Millman must be himself a 34-7 because it was like he knew me.
Right. But he does that for just about all of them. He also has another great book called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior that I read probably 25 years ago.
What his life path number is, but
well, we'll have to look it up sometime. And I also know, depending upon how you slice numerology, another number that resonates with me is the 22, which is the master builder. Like, how do you build structures that help people? And I think as I get older, I'm resonating more with that number as well.
So let's talk about that. What are some of the structures that you are creating for the people in your community?
All right. Well, it actually started back in 2018. I was contemplating leaving my job, but I was like, oh, do I have enough money in my IRA and all that stuff? And I prayed for 3 years, probably starting back in 2016, like, can you move me on from this job? Am I supposed to retire? And I just you gotta wait, you gotta wait, you gotta wait. And in 2018, I had gone through a divorce in 2012 and then met a delightful human who is now my husband in 2015. But we decided we weren't going to move in together and we were just going to take things slowly. So 7 years to the day that we met, we got married, and our life has been great. But for a while, part of my coming home to myself was having my own home. So I bought this wonderful house that had a huge living room that never became a living room, but instead there was a big, huge table and art supplies. And that was a place where I thought, I'm going to bring women together once a month to do art, to do journaling, to meditate, and to do movement, because there's magic when women get together. And it was also a way to start exploring our intuition. So my gathering of women's circles started back in 2018. I retired in 2019. And during COVID, I actually started a monthly group that was called Wise, Wonderful Women. And it was pulling women of all different ages together to just share what was going on. And I did that for free because, again, I got another nudge from the universe. It's like, we need to support and love each other through this very, very challenging time. In January of 2021, I put out to my community that I wanted to do a 44-day creativity adventure for us to all dive deeply into our creativity, because when we do creativity, we're connected to the divine. So I had 11 women who journeyed with me for 44 days, and every day they would get a new prompt that was an art prompt, a journal prompt, a dance prompt, and a music prompt, and just a way to really explore their own creativity. At this point now, I'm doing monthly astrology circles, and I also do intuition and art and soul retreats at my home. That was kind of a long answer. That answered your question.
Yes, it did. And so the retreat, tell us about the next retreat that you have coming up. It's in person, right?
Yes, the next retreat I have coming up is in August the 29th. And what's fun is it's the day that Venus moves into Libra. So she will be at our home, perfect day to gather women. But it's also during the time of Virgo. And so as an astrologer, I've always wanted to put together a Virgo boot camp. Virgo is all about discerning. And in this, we're going to do a deep exploration of what in your life is serving you and what is not serving you. Not from a perfectionistic standpoint, but more from a, what are the relationships that are giving you life? And if they've reached their expiration date, what are you going to do about that? We're going to do some examining of beliefs. We're also going to do examining of personal possessions, because I also believe we have way too much stuff, and our possessions start to possess us. So the format of my half-day retreats is we come and we gather and we talk and we set an intention, and then we always do some movement. So that was another thing, is right before COVID happened, I was in yoga school. I have my yoga teacher training. So to be more intuitive, you have to be in your body, and yoga and breathing and moving is a great way to do that. So I always do some moving, being in our bodies, some breathing exercises, as well as grounding. And from there, we'll usually jump into a topic. We'll take a look at everybody's chart and see what house that Virgo shows up, and see maybe what they're being called to during Virgo season to look at. And then we usually break for lunch and come back and do something with art and journaling. So they're usually from like 9:30 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. I'll have anywhere from 4 to 10 women. And I like to keep it small, because then everybody feels seen and heard, and you can stay in one group as opposed to having it big and huge.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get involved in spirituality to begin with? Were you born into a spiritual religious household, or did you come into that later in life?
So I grew up Catholic. I was the fifth of 5 children, the youngest of 5 children, in a very Catholic household. And we went to church every Sunday, and we went to CCD and religious education either Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday night, all the way up till high school or so. I would say my mom had a deep spirituality, and I think there was a lot of beautiful things about it, but there were many things about the Catholic Church that just didn't work for me. The patriarch, the you are a sinner. And I always found myself really curious about other religions and other ways of being. And my older sister, actually, for my 25th birthday, bought me an astrology reading. And I went to an astrologer. She was living in Boston at the time, and I was visiting her. We drove up to Portland, Maine, and took a ferry over to an island, Peaks Island. And for 2 hours, I sat with this woman, Mary Alice. And she told me things that I knew, but I had never told anybody. The parts of your personality that you don't share. And I thought, this is a pretty amazing thing. And so that was my intro to astrology. And I would say now that astrology is my spiritual practice. And I believe that we have come here to learn how to love and embrace all the parts of ourselves. And we don't do a really good job in the society of teaching ourselves to love. We're really good at teaching ourselves to judge ourselves and being wrong and having to try to be perfect. And then we put that on everybody else too. So fast forward, that's been my intro into spirituality, but I have taken a lot of different classes, whether it's yoga tradition or just learning about different types of religion. I'm a huge fan of Louise Hay and Hay House and just about anything that they publish. But way back in the 80s, I was reading Shakti Gawain, who did creative visualization. And we are so much more powerful than we allow ourselves to believe.
Yeah, I was looking at your chart, and I love that we gave each other the permission. We exchanged birth data information before we even had our conversation. But yeah, that with your Chiron being in that ninth house, I use whole sign house. I don't know what system you use, but with it being there in the
I do
house.
the same.
Okay, so it's there in the house of God, the ninth house. And it's often from whatever place of wounding we have that we are often motivated or best equipped through our life experience to guide others. So, yeah, I was curious how religion played a part in getting you to where you are today. And so that kind of answered that
Well,
question.
that Chiron in the ninth house is also very close to Jupiter. And I think, Catholic Church and some Christianity is very much either you're in or you're out, you're a sinner saved by Jesus or you're not. And I can even remember being in very conservative churches thinking, but God is everywhere. We're in God. God is in all of us. So it's kind of like it didn't make sense to my heart. It's just like, this is a God of love, then love is everywhere for everybody. So I think that also helped inform, that woundedness also helped inform just having a very, very broad perspective.
Mm.
Plus, it's Jupiter in Pisces in the ninth house, and Jupiter just wants to expand, and it's the ocean of compassion and connecting with God. So, yeah.
Well, did you have anything that you wanted to talk about in this moment? Or can I pull a tarot card for us?
I be loving on the tarot card. If you want to pull a tarot card, we sure can talk about it. I just got a new deck that was actually it's a goddess deck. All of the cards are different goddesses with stories, and it's wonderful. And I don't have it right here. It's downstairs, but yeah, I'm a lover of the tarot. It's wonderful.
Do you, and I can always edit this podcast. Did you want to go grab your deck and pull a card for us or?
Yeah, and actually, you know what? I just see it right here. 1 second.
Okay.
I can do it. Oh. All right, so this is the Mythic Goddess Tarot.
All right.
And it's one of those things that I wasn't planning on buying a tarot, but there I was, and it just said, you must come home. I must go home with you. And I'm like, okay, fine. All right, so how I like to do this is what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of like put my hands through them, and then I'll say start. And when it's the card I'm supposed to pick, you get to say stop. Are you ready? Are we aligned for the perfect card?
Yeah.
I'm doing it.
Stop.
Okay. All right. So I love this. This is the Page of Wands.
Mm.
And in this deck, it stands for adventure. And I can't think of what a grander adventure would be than to follow spirit in our life. And I'll just quick look to see if there's any wisdom that we can share from this. So wands are similar to fire, and I am a fire sign. The Page of Wands is playfulness, fresh ideas, a little bit of apprehension. It signifies a passion to succeed, but also an inexperience and nervousness of the unknown and what is to come. You just got to go for it, starting out in a new journey and don't have much of a plan, but seeing where it takes you. Career changes may even occur. It says the start of a flirty and freewheeling romance could be coming your way. It might not lead you to a lifelong commitment, but enjoy what is out there. Alternately, it might signify the rekindling of an old flame from your younger days. Friendships are also looking bright at the horizon. Artists, free spirits, or vital sporty types may be entering your life. Well, I for sure am an artist and a free spirit. I'm not going to say I'm a vital sporty type, but I'm all right. What does that mean to you in terms of Page of Wands?
Well, I have very little fire in my chart. It's mostly air and water. And so for me, fire energy, the wands, I don't know, it's that spark of playfulness and hope and play that I often need to bring into my life because I can get way too serious about things and in my head with all that air energy. So yeah, I love just like not taking things so seriously and having that sense of adventure. I think the more often I can look at anything as an adventure, the better off I am. Because right now I'm thinking about all of my little endeavors on the side, how in the past I have staked everything, including my own self-worth, on these things being successful or working out or gaining traction. But all of those icky feelings kind of fall away when I approach every interaction just as an adventure, see what's going to come up, what I can learn, and not taking everything so seriously. So, say if I have a new offering and nothing comes of it, well, maybe I learned something, or maybe I met someone along the way that I was intended to, and not letting that say more than it's supposed to. Like, it's not saying that I, as a person, am a failure or anything like that. So, just taking life a lot less seriously and bringing a lot more artistry and play. Because I think with a lot of Saturn's influence in my chart, everything has to have a purpose, right? Like there needs to be some type of
As you
agenda.
get right, but as you get older, that Saturn gets easier. So this is what I would say. I think what you just said had so much wisdom, and I've been around the block a few more times than you have. Our patriarchal society wants us to do and produce and says you're only worthy if you have X amount in the bank or 200 people sign up for your offering. And what I can also tell you is since I have left corporate, I feel like I've done this great unwinding to realize that if 3 people sign up and it's the right 3 people, who knows what they're going to learn and then take away to change the world. And I think for those who are giving spiritual offerings, for those who are star seeds, for those who are astrologers or dancers or poets, it's like, can we learn to be present and to surrender? Because that's also being in partnership with the divine. I can't help but thinking this divine feminine is all about receptivity, but it's quietness and it's intuition and it's alignment. And what if the perfect things happen? Because there's also a lot of different ways to define abundance. And we just want to say, is it money in the bank? Is it blah, blah, blah? And it's just like, April, I know a lot of people who make a lot of money and are very lonely and have no community. So it's just like, what? Where are you going to find your riches? Because riches are really defined in a lot of different ways. And if we never did anything, but just showed up as our true self, never did anything again, never published a book, never did a podcast, we are still worthwhile. We're just another reflection of the divine right here, right now. And that's what our job is.
I feel like we could end the podcast on that. That's my sound bite for the podcast. It was so beautiful.
And coming from an Aries 10th house sun, that's a lot, because my chart says this is what I'm wired for. But it's so funny. So, we're both whole sign house people because of going through Nightlight Astrology. But I can remember, I have a great mentor, Larry Arrington, who's out of San Francisco. And it's just like, she says, your chart looks like it's all that Aries sun, but you're really in secret service to the moon. And that's what I feel too. That's why I have to laugh, because my whole chart, if you look really carefully, I really am in secret service to the moon. And it's all about the divine feminine. And I also feel like we're having a great balancing now. The patriarchy is kind of blowing up and being a hot mess. It's trying to hang on for all of its might. But I think we have a change coming. Not going to be easy, but boy, will it be good.
Yeah, and so maybe then we'll see more of the divine masculine energy within each of us, supporting and creating containers for that divine feminine.
Yes. So I
Yeah.
had to tell you something, and I don't mean to get political, but I live in
No, go for it.
Minnesota, and they just named the VP for the Democratic. And what I will tell you, and I was thinking about this when I was walking yesterday, and it's just like, Tim Walz is a really great example of a whole masculine man. I have never seen him demean somebody, put somebody down, but he has always reached across to the other side and said, how can we make it better for everybody? So I was just about in tears yesterday when I saw that they had named him. They're going to be working really, really hard. But I know, living in Minnesota, he got us through COVID, and a lot of people got mad because he shut things down, but he wanted to keep people safe and sound. So I don't know at this point, and I hope all this doesn't change him, but when you see examples of lovely divine masculine, I just feel like you have to call it out. It's real easy to call out the bad, but you know what? There are a lot of good and really fine divine masculine men out there. And so
Yeah, I know I'm married.
I'm married to Ron. He is just an awesome, awesome man, and allows me to be. I'm married to a finance director who's an accountant, and yet we'll talk astrology or anything else, and because he sees how much I love it, and he'll even ask questions because he loves me. It's totally outside his realm of comfort, but like, we've gone on yoga retreats, we've gone on drumming things. It's like,
And I love how we are also called to develop that divine masculine within us, that self leadership. And with you, with that Aries sun, I mean, I think you probably know a lot about that. But yeah, taking action, forward action, self advocating, doing those things, which I've needed to work on myself. So
well, and you know what, I loved what you said before too, is if you think about it, it's kind of like, if we can take this Page of Wand card seriously and be playful and just try it, it's almost like the Fool in tarot. Like, I'm just going to try it. And if I do that with Aries energy anyway. So I will tell you a funny story. When I signed up for Nightlight Astrology, I had been practicing in Placidus, and I did not realize it was Hellenistic astrology, but my Aries in, paid the money, like, this will be so cool. And then we're there, and it's like, what is this Hellenistic thing? And after I graduated from that class, I switched my entire practice to Hellenistic, and I have done now classes with Demetra George, and I am in study groups every week, even diving more into Hellenistic, because I have a great deal of respect for that tradition. So sometimes jumping will get you an interesting place. And the whole thing you said about just don't take it so seriously.
yeah.
So I don't know if y'all know, but we don't get out of here alive. So why are we taking it so seriously? And at the same time, we do, because we go on forever. But like, play and have fun while you're here. Our souls came here to have experiences. So let's have some fun experiences.
Yeah, when we're talking about astrology and learning it, I went through year one of Nightlight Astrology, and that's as far as I've gotten so far. And I have enough on my plate with just the traditional seven planets, but I think it is really fascinating, and I would love to one day be able to reach beyond that to include asteroids other than just Chiron. It's just that Chiron has really resonated for me, its placement. It highlights a lot, explains a lot of what has gone on in my life. And so because I've resonated so much with Chiron, it's easy for me to incorporate that into what I look at in a chart. But other than that, I would love to one day become familiar with asteroids. It's the same thing with mythology. I love the story behind it, but then I'm not so great at remembering the names and the specifics of things. So it just ends up being this muddled mess. But it is really cool. I'm interested in seeing if in your own chart you have found any really cool synchronicities. But I found out that the asteroid Texas, and there's an asteroid named Texas, and it is conjunct my North Node in Leo. And so I'm like, of course, Texas would be big,
So
bright, bold sign, 10th house.
yes. All right. So I love that because asteroids get creepily accurate. And I'll just give you an example. A year ago at this time, I have a daughter who lives in Alaska, and we were in Seward, Alaska, going through the Kenai Peninsula. And there's all these fjords there. And in this little town, Seward, there's this beautiful mural of this Inuit woman and all of the sea creatures around her. And I Googled it and I found out that it was Sedna. And I don't know if you know the mythology of Sedna, but
I
Sedna
do,
married
because Nightlight Astrology had a workshop recently
on Sedna.
on Sedna. Yes.
Okay. All right. So her father rescues her, but then a big storm comes up and he throws her over the side and she's hanging on. And I'm sorry, this is graphic, but he cuts her fingers off and she falls to the sea. And then all of her fingers turn into the sea creatures. And in that part of the world, they pray to Sedna because she brings all of the whales and the dolphins and the sea creatures that the people depend on. And there's all sorts of things about Sedna. So back in August, I just learned about Sedna. Fast forward December, I go to Palm Springs for this asteroid retreat. And I've always considered myself part mermaid. I love living by the sea. I've always had this connection to the ocean. And then I find out that the asteroid Sedna was conjunct my son the day I was born.
Oh, wow.
So it's like these things are creepily accurate, and you can learn a whole lot. So I just had done an offering on the divine feminine in your chart using the asteroids of Juno, Pallas Athene. I also used the moon and Venus, and now I can't remember the two others. Oh, Vesta, what keeps your home fires burning? Oh, and then Lilith, how are you a wild child and where do you rebel? And I had 21 women in this class, and it was so fun to see people see different facets of themselves through the asteroids. So I know I will offer an asteroid class sometime, probably on Zoom. I just haven't. We're heading to Spain for 3 weeks and my fall is busy, but sometime in the future, or if you're interested in an asteroid chart, let me know because I would be happy to run one for you.
I would love that. So this brings us into the next segment really well. How can people find out more about you and follow what you're making in your own sandbox?
Haha. All right. Great question. So if you go to Peggy Foster Astrology, you can find out a lot more. And it's so funny. The picture that's on my website is the same shirt I'm wearing today. Yes, I have more clothes than this, but it just is how it is. So you can definitely do that if you're interested in being in a once a month women's group. I do kind of an astrological weather where we look at the upcoming transits of the month, but then we also dive deeply into everybody's chart and see where the transits are hitting their charts. We've also been working through the book Astrology for Yourself by Demetra George, which if you're trying to learn astrology, every month we pick a different planet to dive deeply on and to apply it into the chart. So that's, you can go to the website. I have those classes. That's kind of what's going on for right now. For those who live locally in Minnesota, I have my Virgo boot camp retreat coming up. If I have people request it and I'll do it online, it'll usually if I have a class, I put it out on my webpage.
Okay, lovely. The next one is about teachers. I love how in the Lifestylist podcast, Luke Story, I don't know if he still does it, but he used to end his pods asking his guests this question, and I liked it so much that I included it in my episodes. Who have been 3 teachers or teachings in your life that you might share with our audience that they could go research and also learn from?
Okay, well, I kind of took this in a different way, is that I pulled 3 books that I use a lot.
Okay.
But if there was one teacher, so shout out to a wonderful, beautiful astrologer and wise woman, Heather Roan Robbins. She has card decks on astrology and a beautiful book on the moon, but she's been my spiritual mentor for over a decade. and I've learned a lot about life. She's helped me to get through many, many things, and she's a brilliant astrologer. So she would be one of the teachers. But 3 books. One is called The Intuitive Way by Penney. So if you want to deepen your intuition, do some exercises, or just even learn a little bit more about intuition, that's a great book, The Intuitive Way by Penney. The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I have been working with this book for more than 20 years, and every time I go through it, I uncover a new version of myself. There's a great exercise that says, imagine yourself having 5 different lives. And I can remember one year saying, I'd like to be a yoga teacher. I would like to have my own company. I would like to have an artist studio. I would like to become an astrologer, and also my own HR company. And within a year of me writing about all those things, seeds were planted for me to do all 5 of those things. And now I have. So it's kind of like listening to your inner sparks and then figuring out ways to follow up with them. And then the last one is You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. So if you can find any book by Louise Hay, or go to Hay House Publishing, she's in the world of spirituality, but it's all about learning to love and accept yourself. And we are going to have wounds, but we also have the capacity to heal ourselves. So those would be my teachers.
So this is where I would normally just end it, but is there anything else that you wanted to close with, or something that you felt like you didn't have an opportunity to say that you would like to kind of expand on a little bit?
I so thank you for that invitation. And this is the nudge that's coming to me. We had kind of like the agriculture age that then was the industrial age that then became the informational age. I believe that we're on a precipice now of the intuitive age. I think it is a call for everybody to stop seeing what's outside and to start going inside, listening to your body, asking your body before you eat something or drink something, do I really want or need this? Is this for my highest good? If you get a funny vibe about something, listen to it. Maybe start doing journaling to see what other messages will come through. But if there was one thing or 2 things that I would think would change the world, is 1, everybody really listening to their inner self. And 2nd, and probably even more importantly, how can I love and accept myself right now as I am? Not when I get the job or the house or the perfect body or all those things that keep us from ourselves. One of the things Louise Hay says is when you get up in the morning and you go in the bathroom, even before you go to the bathroom, look at your eyes in the mirror and tell yourself, I love you. And if you did that, you will change the world, one heart at a time.
I love that, because I recently had a intuitive psychic reading from someone, and the message that came through was that, hey, all this mindset work that you're trying to do, maybe it's great and all, but stop trying to muscle through and do it that way, and just be with your body, because it has its own wisdom and its own things that it wants to tell you. And you can get the same result by figuring out, where does stuck energy feel, or where do you not feel great within your body, and trying to translate that, and what is it that trying to communicate to you, and clearing that. And that in itself can get you where you want to be faster or more effectively than just trying to muscle through with mindset changes. And so, at least for me, what you're saying is very resonant. So thank you.
Okay. Muscling through is like pushing the river. And we're supposed to be, so another great resource is anything by Esther Hicks, Abraham Hicks, is that it's about when you get into alignment, you're in the flow. But anything we resist persists. And that's the other thing too. We push and we push. And maybe you get an uncomfortable feeling inside, or you feel anxious. So you're like, well, if I go work really hard, then I won't feel anxious. What if your body is calling you to feel anxious because underneath it's trying to give you the message, this isn't the job for you. These are not your people. This is not the relationship for you. We don't want you in this neighborhood, this house, this whatever. We have something better for you. But when we don't listen, we keep trying to push and struggle, and like, I'm finally going to love myself when I have 100,000 likes in Facebook or whatever. And it's like, and then you'll get the 100,000 likes and you're still not going to feel good. So what if it was coming back to feeling good and then letting that inform what you're doing. And sometimes it's not doing. Sometimes it's just being. Because here's the other thing. We need to get quiet and be in that being state and being grounded. Then we get all the intuition and all the messages that we need. But when you're loud and out there, you can't hear anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have so many thoughts because my natal Mars is in the 8th house of inactivity.
And it's in Gemini, which makes you so restless. And you're not restless once, you're restless twice. And then you do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
So
I saw your
that
8th
has
house
been
Mars, and I'm like,
that's been my journey. That Mars that wants to keep pushing and pushing because it's the ruler of my ascendant as well. So it's like I just want to keep pushing and pushing when the answer so much of the time is just to get quiet and still and receive. And
so what if you could interpret that differently? You're just about to come up to a Mars return too. When Jupiter and Mars come together, it's going to be sitting right on top of your natal Mars. The 8th house is a house of receptivity. The 8th house is a mystical house. So what if you were to take action on mysticism, which means being quiet
yeah.
and trusting?
Okay, thank you so
Easier
much
said
for
than done.
this. This has been incredible. I'm glad we listened to our intuition and connected and had this conversation. And you were such a sport. I will tell people that when we first came together at 2 o'clock this afternoon and I pushed record, you're like, what are we doing? And like I not and I was like, oh, I sent you an email. We're recording for the podcast. And you're like, oh, I thought we were just going to be talking about the podcast, getting ready for it. I'm like, oh, but I sent you this email, which I ended up not sending. Anyway, you were really such a great sport. Thank you so much for, yeah, being in that place of flexibility with me. And it's much appreciated. Thank you.
You are so welcome. And guess what? It's perfectly imperfect. We
Mm.
spend way too much of our life trying to be perfect because we think being perfect will make us safe. And instead, we just need to be brave and be willing to play.
Yeah, I think there's so much of my childhood. What I was informed in my childhood is that if I were to just do enough or do the right things, I would be loved or I would get that positive attention. And it's just, yeah, being more receptive and like you said, loving myself as I am in this moment because there's always going to be something else I could do or it's not perfect yet. And so that whole self-love piece has been a giant part of what I'm incorporating into my life. Mhm.
Well, and you being a sun in Cancer, Cancer is the crab and protective, and you're really great about caring about everybody else and nurturing everybody else. But the real lesson of anybody with a lot of Cancerian energy, gotta love and nurture and take care of the soft, really soft and sensitive inside and
Oh, it's
intuitive
really
and tough on
soft
the
too.
outside. And it's just like, yeah, what's the sign of the mother? How do I mother myself and nurture myself? And from that place of filling myself out with love, then I have more for others. But first and foremost for yourself. And in our society, we're taught that that's selfish. No, it's self-care. And that's the other reason I love working with women is so many women are entrained to empty themselves and then resent everybody. And I'm like, and you're at choice. What do you really, really want to do? Well, I don't want to bake 16 cupcakes. Well, then don't. They'll figure it out. No is a complete answer, complete sentence.
Thank you, Peggy, so much for joining me in the sandbox. Much love to you.
Much love to you.